Elon Musk just approved your payment, check your account before it's gone. Don't skip. Stay with this till the end. This message may resonate more than you expect. Sometimes a phrase appears in front of you and it doesn't feel random. Not because of what it claims, but because of how it pauses you. You didn't rush past this moment. You slowed down. And there's a reason this moment feels familiar. You may recognize yourself in this pause, in the quiet attention that didn't demand excitement, only presence. You've learned over time that the most meaningful shifts don't arrive loudly. They arrive as awareness. A subtle sense that something inside you has changed, even if the outside hasn't caught up yet. Stay with me. This part matters. For a long time, you've been carrying effort quietly. Showing up without applause. Making decisions without guarantees. That kind of growth doesn't announce itself. But it leaves a mark. And something important is taking shape. You didn't arrive here by chasing noise. You arrived because your focus matured. Because you learned how to sit with uncertainty without losing yourself in it. That ability wasn't given to you. It was built. Stay with this. You may notice that your attention works differently now. You don't react the way you used to. You pause. You assess. You choose. That pause isn't hesitation. It's clarity, learning how to speak before urgency interrupts. There's a reason messages like this don't feel like information. They feel like reflection. They don't tell you who you should be. They remind you who you already are becoming. Something important is taking shape. Think about how often your progress felt delayed. How many times you wondered if you were falling behind. At the time, it felt like waiting. Now, it begins to feel like preparation. Those delays trained you to rely less on speed and more on alignment. Stay with me. You're not in the same place you were before, even if life looks similar on the surface. Your awareness is sharper. Your boundaries are clearer. Your energy is more intentional. These changes don't make noise, but they change outcomes. Something important is taking shape because you stayed consistent when quitting would have been easier. You may notice that urgency doesn't control you the way it once did. You still care. You're still focused. But you're no longer rushing to arrive. That shift changes how progress responds to you. Stay with this. This part matters. The idea suggested by the title isn't about an external transaction. It's about internal readiness. About recognizing that you're prepared to receive the next step without forcing it. That recognition doesn't excite you. It steadies you. You might feel calmer lately, even when things aren't fully resolved. That calm isn't detachment. It's confidence without noise. It's knowing you can respond thoughtfully when the moment arrives. Something important is taking shape. You've handled more than you give yourself credit for. Pressure without clarity. Responsibility without reassurance. And instead of hardening, you refined. That refinement is why focus feels easier now. Stay with me. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This is the shift that changes everything. When you stop waiting for proof and start trusting awareness, you don't chase outcomes. You recognize them. They fit instead of impress. You may notice that certain distractions no longer hold your attention. Conversations feel different. Priorities rearrange themselves. This isn't loss. It's alignment. Something important is taking shape. As this awareness settles, progress becomes quieter but more reliable. Decisions feel simpler. Movement feels intentional. You're no longer fighting yourself. Stay with this till the end. This message isn't here to promise anything. It's here to reflect something. That your steadiness has been preparing you. That your patience wasn't passive. That your clarity didn't appear by accident. Slow the pace here. Let that settle. The next steps won't arrive loudly. They'll feel obvious. Calm. Familiar. You'll recognize them not by excitement, but by ease. Stay with me. Stay with me. Don't skip. This part matters more than it seems. If you're still here, notice how natural it feels to continue. Not because you're waiting for a reveal, but because something in this rhythm matches where you are right now. You're not being pulled forward by urgency. You're being held by recognition. There's a reason this moment feels familiar. You may recognize yourself in this calm willingness to stay present. You've reached a phase where attention itself has value. You don't give it away easily anymore. That didn't happen overnight. It came from learning what drains you and what quietly strengthens you. That discernment is inner growth becoming visible. Something important is taking shape. You may notice that your thoughts feel more organized now. Not silent, but intentional. You don't follow every idea to the end. You choose which ones deserve your energy. That choice creates clarity, and clarity changes how progress unfolds. Stay with me. For a long time, you measured progress by speed. By how quickly things moved. By how soon results appeared. But experience taught you something different. That speed without alignment creates exhaustion. And alignment without noise creates stability. You didn't learn that from theory. You learned it from living through moments that asked you to slow down. Something important is taking shape because you stopped forcing timelines that never fit you. You may recognize that your relationship with effort has changed. You still apply yourself, but you don't overextend. You rest without guilt. You pause without fear. That balance allows you to keep going without burning out. Stay with this. The idea suggested earlier isn't about checking something outside yourself. It's about noticing what's already been approved internally. The way you trust your judgment more now. The way you no longer need constant reassurance to keep moving. That approval didn't come from anyone else. It came from experience settling into confidence. Something important is taking shape. Think about how you handle uncertainty now. You don't rush to resolve it. You allow it to exist without letting it take control. That ability creates space. And in that space, awareness grows stronger. Stay with me. This part matters. You're beginning to see that clarity doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in layers. Through repeated moments of choosing intention over impulse. Through choosing focus over distraction. Those small decisions accumulate quietly. You may notice that certain worries don't return the way they used to. When they do appear, they don't stay as long. You don't argue with them. You observe them. That shift gives you freedom. Something important is taking shape because you've learned how to step back without disconnecting. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding changes how you experience time. You're less concerned with how long something takes and more attentive to how it feels while unfolding. That awareness reduces pressure and increases clarity. Stay with me. You may feel a growing sense of calm confidence. Not the kind that announces itself, but the kind that steadies you in motion. You don't need to explain your choices as much. You don't need to defend your pace. You know why you're moving the way you are. Something important is taking shape. You might notice that your focus has narrowed in a healthy way. Fewer priorities. Clearer intentions. This isn't limitation. It's refinement. When focus sharpens, energy follows. Stay with this. You've reached a point where validation feels optional. Helpful at times, but no longer necessary. You trust your internal signals more than external noise. That trust allows you to remain steady even when opinions shift around you. Think about how often you now return to center. How quickly you recalibrate after stress. That resilience didn't appear by chance. It was built through repetition. Something important is taking shape because you kept returning instead of quitting. As this part continues, notice how nothing here asks you to rush. There's no countdown. No pressure. That absence of urgency is intentional. It mirrors the state you're learning to operate from. Stay with me. This part matters. You're learning that progress responds to steadiness more than force. When your attention is grounded, outcomes align more naturally. Not dramatically, but reliably. You may recognize that you're more patient with yourself now. Less critical. More honest. That shift softens internal resistance and makes growth sustainable. Something important is taking shape. You don't need to see the entire path to take the next step. You trust that clarity will arrive when it's needed. That trust removes unnecessary strain. Stay with this till the end. As this part settles, notice how your body feels. Less tense. More grounded. That physical response reflects internal alignment. Your awareness and your pace are beginning to work together. You're not holding on to this moment tightly. You're letting it be. That ease is confidence in its simplest form. Something important is taking shape, and it's meeting you exactly where your focus has matured. Stay with me. Carry this steadiness forward. Let it guide how you listen, how you decide, how you move through the next moments. You don't need to rush ahead. You'll recognize what aligns when it appears. Stay with me. Don't skip. This part matters in a way that builds quietly, not all at once. If you're still listening, notice how your attention hasn't drifted. It hasn't been pulled by urgency or excitement. It stayed because something here feels steady. That steadiness reflects something in you. You may recognize yourself in this calm engagement, in the way you no longer need intensity to stay present. You've reached a point where focus feels natural instead of forced. Earlier in life, attention required effort. You had to push yourself to stay with things. Now, when something aligns, staying feels effortless. That change didn't happen randomly. It came from experience teaching you what truly deserves your energy. Something important is taking shape. You may notice that your internal dialogue has softened. Not silent, but less demanding. You don't pressure yourself the way you once did. You allow thoughts to come and go without letting them take over. That space gives clarity room to form. Stay with me. You're beginning to understand that progress doesn't always feel like motion. Sometimes it feels like stability. Like standing firmly enough that movement becomes a choice, not a necessity. That stability gives you confidence without noise. Think about how you respond to challenges now. You don't immediately brace yourself for impact. You assess. You breathe. You respond. That pause between challenge and reaction is where inner strength lives. Something important is taking shape because you learned how to pause without losing momentum. You might notice that you're less interested in proving anything. Less concerned with being seen or validated. Not because you've withdrawn, but because you're grounded. When your sense of direction comes from within, external approval becomes less urgent. Stay with this. The sense of anticipation suggested earlier isn't about waiting for an external signal. It's about recognizing that your internal readiness has matured. You're prepared to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. That readiness doesn't rush you. It steadies you. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding changes how you experience choice. Decisions don't feel as heavy. You don't overanalyze every possibility. You sense what aligns more quickly. That intuition isn't loud. It's consistent. Something important is taking shape. You may notice that your energy recovers faster now. Stress doesn't linger as long. When things don't go as planned, you recalibrate instead of spiraling. That resilience was built through repetition, not perfection. Stay with me. This part matters. You've learned that alignment isn't about avoiding difficulty. It's about moving through difficulty without abandoning yourself. You don't push past your limits blindly anymore. You listen. You adjust. That balance allows growth to continue without exhaustion. Think about how you now relate to time. You're less anxious about how long things take. You're more attentive to how they unfold. That shift reduces pressure and creates space for clarity. Something important is taking shape because you respected your own pace. You might feel a growing sense of confidence that doesn't need reinforcement. Not the kind that announces itself, but the kind that shows up in consistency. You follow through more often. You keep promises to yourself. That reliability builds trust internally. Stay with this. You're beginning to notice that silence feels different now. It's no longer empty or uncomfortable. It feels informative. In quiet moments, you sense direction without forcing it. That's awareness learning how to guide you gently. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding allows you to remain steady even when outcomes aren't clear. You don't need immediate confirmation to continue. You trust that clarity will arrive when it's relevant. Something important is taking shape. You may recognize that your focus has become more selective in relationships as well. You engage more deeply where there's mutual respect. You step back where energy feels misaligned. This isn't avoidance. It's discernment. Stay with me. This part matters. You've reached a stage where consistency feels more powerful than intensity. You don't need dramatic bursts of motivation. You show up steadily. That steadiness compounds quietly over time. As this part unfolds, notice how your body responds. Less tension in your shoulders. A slower breath. That physical response reflects internal alignment. Your awareness and your pace are beginning to work together. Something important is taking shape because you're no longer fighting your own rhythm. You might sense that your confidence now comes from experience rather than expectation. You've seen yourself handle uncertainty. You've watched yourself adapt. That evidence lives inside you. Stay with this till the end. You don't need to rush ahead to secure what comes next. You don't need to hold back either. The next step will feel clear because it aligns with who you are now, not who you were trying to be before. This part isn't meant to conclude anything abruptly. It's meant to settle with you. To remind you that understanding deepens when you allow it time. Something important is taking shape, and it's responding to the calm confidence you now carry naturally. Stay with me. Let this awareness continue with you beyond this moment. Not as something you need to protect, but as something that returns when you slow down and notice. Stay with me. Don't skip. This part matters because it brings everything you've been sensing into clearer focus. If you're still here, notice how your attention now feels settled rather than searching. Earlier, you may have been listening for direction. Now, it feels more like recognition. As if something you already knew is being gently confirmed. There's a reason this moment feels familiar. You may recognize yourself in this quiet clarity. You've moved into a phase where understanding doesn't arrive as sudden insight, but as steady knowing. You don't need things to be explained repeatedly. You sense when something fits and when it doesn't. That sensitivity wasn't always there. It developed through experience, through moments where you had to trust yourself without certainty. Something important is taking shape. You may notice that you're less reactive to the world around you. News, opinions, expectations. They pass through without pulling you off balance. That doesn't mean you're disconnected. It means you're grounded. Your center feels stronger now. Stay with me. You've learned that not every moment requires a response. Sometimes presence is enough. Sometimes observation creates more clarity than action. That discernment protects your energy and allows you to move when movement actually matters. Think about how you approach challenges now. You don't brace yourself the way you used to. You meet them with curiosity instead of resistance. That shift changes how challenges affect you. They become information rather than obstacles. Something important is taking shape because you're no longer fighting every wave. You might notice that your inner dialogue has become more cooperative. You still question, but without harshness. You reflect, but without spiraling. That internal tone matters. It shapes how you experience progress. Stay with this. You're beginning to see that alignment isn't about getting everything right. It's about responding honestly to what's present. When something doesn't align, you notice it quickly. You don't force yourself to stay where you've outgrown the space. That willingness to move on quietly is a form of strength. Something important is taking shape. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding changes how you relate to outcomes. You no longer attach your sense of worth to results. You care about direction more than destination. That shift removes pressure and restores focus. You may notice that your patience has deepened. Not the kind that waits passively, but the kind that remains engaged without anxiety. You trust that progress unfolds through consistency, not urgency. Stay with me. This part matters. You've likely experienced moments recently where you surprised yourself with how calmly you handled something that once would have overwhelmed you. That's not coincidence. That's growth revealing itself. Your awareness has learned how to regulate itself. You don't escalate internally as easily. You recover faster. You return to center more quickly. That resilience is built, not gifted. Something important is taking shape because you kept practicing steadiness. You might sense that your relationship with ambition has shifted. You still aim forward, but you don't rush blindly. You're more intentional about where you invest your time and attention. That intention gives your actions weight. Stay with this. You're beginning to trust that clarity will meet you at the right moments. You don't need to anticipate every outcome. You don't need to control every variable. You allow space for understanding to arrive naturally. That allowance creates ease. Something important is taking shape. As this part continues, notice how your body responds. Your breath slows. Your shoulders drop. These physical signals reflect internal alignment. When your body and awareness work together, engagement becomes effortless. You may also notice that you're more selective with conversations. You listen more than you speak. When you do speak, your words feel more deliberate. That presence carries quiet authority. Stay with me. This part matters. You're learning that influence doesn't come from volume. It comes from steadiness. People sense when someone is grounded. They respond differently. Opportunities open in subtle ways. You're not forcing anything. You're allowing alignment to do its work. Something important is taking shape. You've reached a point where reflection feels more valuable than reaction. You pause before responding, not out of fear, but out of clarity. That pause often reveals the best next step. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding also changes how you view the past. You don't revisit it to criticize yourself. You revisit it to extract meaning. Once the meaning is integrated, you let it go. That process frees energy. Stay with this. You may feel that your sense of identity has become more flexible. You're less attached to labels. You're more interested in how you show up moment to moment. That flexibility allows growth without conflict. Something important is taking shape because you're no longer rigid with yourself. As this part comes closer to its end, notice how engagement feels now. Not intense. Not passive. Balanced. That balance is something you've been cultivating, even when you didn't have words for it. You don't need to rush to the next phase. You don't need to hold on to this one either. You trust that awareness will guide the transition naturally. Stay with me. You've built enough inner strength to move forward without abandoning what grounds you. That strength doesn't shout. It supports. Something important is taking shape, and it's responding to the calm confidence you now carry consistently. Let this awareness remain with you as you continue. Not as a rule, but as a reference. A place you know how to return to. Stay with me. Don't skip. This part matters because it brings the deeper layers into view. If you're still here, notice how engagement feels different now. Not like holding on, but like settling in. Earlier, your attention may have been curious. Now it feels grounded. That shift didn't come from effort. It came from familiarity. From recognizing a rhythm that matches your own inner pace. You may recognize yourself in this steadiness. You've reached a stage where clarity doesn't arrive as a sudden breakthrough. It arrives as quiet certainty. A sense that you don't need to question every step anymore. You still think carefully, but you don't doubt yourself the way you once did. That difference changes how you move through life. Something important is taking shape. You might notice that your relationship with effort has softened. You still apply yourself, but without tension. You work without constantly checking for results. You trust that what you're doing has value, even when outcomes aren't immediately visible. That trust wasn't always there. It grew through experience. Stay with me. You've learned that forcing progress often creates resistance. And that when you move with intention instead of urgency, things respond more naturally. This understanding didn't come from theory. It came from moments when pushing harder only made things heavier. Think about how you handle setbacks now. You don't collapse into them. You don't ignore them either. You observe, adjust, and continue. That balanced response is a form of strength that often goes unnoticed. Something important is taking shape because you learned how to continue without hardening. You may notice that your internal expectations have shifted. You don't demand perfection from yourself. You don't expect every decision to feel completely certain. You allow room for learning as you go. That flexibility keeps you moving. Stay with this. The sense of anticipation you may have felt earlier is transforming. It's no longer about waiting for something to arrive. It's about recognizing that you're already equipped to handle what does. That recognition changes how you experience the present moment. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding shows up in how you relate to pressure. Pressure no longer feels like a threat. It feels like information. It tells you where to focus, where to adjust, and where to let go. Something important is taking shape. You might notice that your energy feels more consistent now. You don't rely on bursts of motivation. You rely on rhythm. You know when to engage and when to rest. That rhythm supports sustainability instead of burnout. Stay with me. This part matters. You've likely become more comfortable with uncertainty. Not because you enjoy it, but because you trust yourself within it. You know that even if things don't go exactly as planned, you'll respond thoughtfully. That trust is deeply stabilizing. You're beginning to see that alignment isn't about avoiding challenges. It's about meeting them without abandoning your values. You don't compromise what matters just to move faster. You move in ways that feel honest. Something important is taking shape because you stayed true to yourself when shortcuts were tempting. You may notice that your attention has become less fragmented. You don't jump between concerns as often. You stay with one thing long enough to understand it. That depth of focus creates meaningful progress. Stay with this. You're also learning to let go more easily. Not in a detached way, but in a discerning way. When something no longer fits, you don't force it to stay. You release it without drama. That ability creates space. Something important is taking shape. As this part continues, notice how calm feels different now. It's not something you seek. It's something you return to. You know how to slow yourself down when things feel overwhelming. That skill is invaluable. You may recognize that your sense of identity has become more fluid. You're less attached to who you were supposed to be. You're more interested in how you show up right now. That openness allows growth without conflict. Stay with me. This part matters. You're beginning to trust your internal signals more than external noise. When something feels aligned, you don't need a long explanation. When something feels off, you don't ignore it. That trust simplifies decisions. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding also affects how you measure success. You don't look only at outcomes. You look at how you felt while moving toward them. Whether you stayed grounded. Whether you stayed honest. Those measures matter to you now. Something important is taking shape because your values are guiding your actions more consistently. You might notice that your presence feels stronger in conversations. You listen fully. You speak when it matters. You don't rush to fill silence. That presence creates connection without effort. Stay with this. You've reached a point where engagement doesn't depend on novelty. You don't need constant stimulation to remain interested. You find meaning in depth rather than variety. That shift changes how you experience time. Moments feel fuller. Not longer, but more complete. Something important is taking shape. As this part moves toward its close, notice how nothing here asks you to hurry. Nothing pressures you to decide. It simply reflects the steadiness you've been cultivating. You don't need to hold on to this feeling tightly. You know how to return to it. It lives in your awareness now. Stay with me. You're carrying a calm confidence that doesn't need reinforcement. It shows up in consistency, in patience, in the way you keep going even when things are quiet. Something important has been taking shape all along, and it's meeting you exactly where you are, grounded, aware, and ready to continue without force. Stay with me. Don't skip. This final part matters, not because it adds something new, but because it helps everything settle. If you're still here, notice how your attention feels now. It isn't strained. It isn't searching. It's simply present. That presence didn't come from effort. It came from familiarity. From spending enough time in this rhythm that it now feels natural. You may recognize yourself in this calm steadiness. You've reached a point where understanding doesn't need to be explained. It's felt. Earlier, you may have been listening for direction or reassurance. Now, it feels more like confirmation. As if something you already knew has been quietly affirmed. Something important has been taking shape all along. Throughout this entire experience, nothing rushed you. Nothing demanded belief. Nothing promised outcomes. And yet, you stayed. That alone says something about where you are right now. You're no longer drawn in by urgency. You're guided by relevance. You've learned that the most meaningful changes don't arrive dramatically. They arrive as a shift in how you relate to yourself. How you respond. How you choose. Those shifts are subtle, but they are durable. Stay with me. You may notice that your internal world feels more organized. Not controlled, but coherent. Thoughts arise and pass without pulling you apart. Emotions move through you without overwhelming your direction. That balance is the result of awareness learning how to hold experience gently. You didn't force this balance. You practiced it. You practiced staying present when things were unclear. You practiced patience when answers were delayed. You practiced returning to center when distraction took over. Each time you did that, something inside you strengthened. Something important has been taking shape because you kept returning. You're no longer waiting for permission to trust yourself. You're no longer asking every external signal to confirm your direction. You check in with yourself first now. And when something aligns, you move without needing to justify it. That trust didn't come from certainty. It came from experience. Stay with this. You may realize that your sense of identity has become quieter, but more stable. You don't define yourself by temporary states or shifting outcomes. You define yourself by how you show up consistently. That consistency creates confidence without noise. You're not trying to become someone else anymore. You're refining who you already are. Something important has been taking shape. As this final part continues, notice how your body feels. Your breath is slower. Your posture is softer. These physical cues matter. They reflect internal alignment. When your body and awareness work together, engagement becomes effortless. You're no longer bracing for what comes next. You're open to it. You may notice that your relationship with time has changed. You don't feel chased by it. You don't feel stalled by it. You move with it. That shift removes pressure and restores clarity. Stay with me. This part matters. You've learned that progress isn't always visible from the outside. Sometimes it shows up as resilience. As emotional regulation. As the ability to stay grounded when circumstances fluctuate. Those forms of progress don't get applause, but they create stability. And stability is what allows growth to last. Something important has been taking shape because you chose steadiness over spectacle. You're not waiting anymore. You're understanding. This understanding doesn't demand action. It informs it. When action is needed, you'll know. When rest is needed, you'll allow it. You no longer confuse movement with urgency or stillness with stagnation. You trust your rhythm. You may notice that you're more selective with where you place your energy. Not because you've become closed off, but because you respect your capacity. You invest where it matters. You step back where it doesn't. That discernment protects what you're building. Stay with this. As this message nears its end, notice that nothing here is asking you to hold on to it tightly. There's no cliffhanger. No demand to stay longer than feels right. That's intentional. It mirrors the state you're learning to operate from, engaged without attachment. You don't need to extract a lesson from this moment. You don't need to label it. Simply notice how it feels to remain present without needing more. That feeling is alignment. You've reached a place where calm confidence guides you more reliably than excitement ever could. You don't need to announce your readiness. You live it through how you move, how you listen, how you decide. Something important has already taken shape, not as an event, but as a way of being. And that's why this ending doesn't rush you forward. It grounds you where you are. Because from here, forward movement happens naturally. Stay with this for a moment longer. Let this steadiness settle into your awareness. Let it become familiar enough that you recognize it again when life becomes loud. You know how to return to this state now. You've practiced it. You don't need to wait for a signal to trust yourself. You don't need urgency to feel alive. You don't need noise to confirm progress. You already carry what you need. As you move on from here, let clarity guide your focus. Let intention shape your choices. Let calm confidence support your steps. Something important has been taking shape all along, and it continues with you, not as a promise, but as a presence. That recognition is enough. Stay grounded. Stay aware. And move forward at the pace that feels true to you.